It's time. Assaulting the narrative. Destroying the lie. Unearthing the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Live from West Palm Beach, Florida. Heard coast to coast and all around the world. High Noon with John Gordon.
I am so pleased to be joined now by KT McFarland. If you read her biography, she is a who's who in the United States federal government. She started as a typist for the State Department, I believe, or the National Security Agency under Richard Nixon, and she would type confidential memorandum that were specifically and prepared exclusively for the president in his following day briefing. KT McFarland, it's an honor to have you on the show. Welcome to The Truth with John Gordon.
It's great to be with you. Thank you. That story's not quite accurate. I started in the west basement of the White House, west wing of the White House, working for Henry Kissinger in 1970. Typing, as you pointed out, I was in the typing pool, but then worked my way up the food chain in the Nixon and Ford administrations, then went to graduate school, and then had other far more senior positions in the Reagan and then the Trump administration.
Well, you really, and I'm sorry I got the chronology a little mixed up, but I have read your entire bio, and I just commend you and have such admiration for you because, you don't appear to have been someone who achieved your positions through political patronage. It really does look to me that you earned old-fashioned way, and you just worked, starting in the typing pool, working your way up, and acquiring knowledge and trust, I would have to say.
Well, thank you. I worked very hard, and I was very lucky in some ways because I'm the era, I'm old enough, 72 years old, to when women my age were starting to go to college, get degrees, enter the workforce. There were professional women, few and far between, nurses, there were teachers, and there were sales assistants, but there sure were people in the West Wing of the White House who had substantive policy positions. So throughout my career, I've been able to be right at the vanguard of this movement, and I'm very honored by it. I'm very proud of it, and I'm thrilled when I look at my daughter's generation and see all the things that they're able to achieve as a matter of right.
When you speak of your daughter, are you talking about Fiona McFarland?
I have two daughters, one Camilla McFarland who lives in London, and she's a tech whiz, and then another daughter, Representative Fiona McFarland. She's a state representative in Florida to the Florida State House. She's from Sarasota, and she just this week got legislation introduced and passed to ban the social media companies in Florida from having accounts for children under the age of 16. It's landmark, it's revolutionary, and she's led the fight for it, and I think it's gotten a lot of national attention in the last 72 hours.
Well, and she is also a graduate of the Naval Academy.
She and her husband both went to the Naval Academy, yeah. And she's a lieutenant in the Navy Reserves.
Well, you've two wonderful daughters, and speaking for myself, nothing in my life matters more to me having the satisfaction of raising three fine sons. It's a work in progress, but you and I are both very lucky in that regard. So I want to ask you some tough questions. Will you go there, Ms.
Sure.
McFarland? Do you believe, as I do, in the sanctity of and the respect for the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you believe it should be our guiding light? Do you think that it should be respected and followed at all cost?
Absolutely.
Me too. So are you worried about it? Are you worried about the erosion at the fringes of our judiciary, and also right up there with honoring the Constitution? As you may know by virtue of the name of our show, the truth is very important to me, and it seems to be a dying value in our culture today. Would you agree, or am I being overly pessimistic?
No, I think that the United States and all we believe in and the Constitution is really under assault from inside and outside. It's obviously under assault from our adversaries, whether it's China, Iran, Russia, pick your country. At the border, we're under assault because we have an open border, and millions of especially young military-aged men are coming across that border and disappearing into the United States. And they're not Hispanic. They may have started as Hispanics, but now they're Chinese, they're Iranian, they're people from all over the world. And we don't know who they are, we don't know where they are, and we certainly don't know what they're going to be up to. And I would say domestically in Washington, we're under assault really from the administrative state. I mean, when I was in the Trump administration, so I was Deputy National Security Advisor, and in that job, your job is, so there's a Secretary of State, he goes all around the world, negotiates. There's a National Security Advisor, and he's at the elbow of the president every day for meetings, crisis management. But then there's the Deputy Secretary of State, and that's the person who's charged within the government of coming up with the ideas, getting them implemented throughout the government. So that's the think tank. That's the person who's charged with those things. And it was a terrific job, and I loved it. But the Russia hoax caught me up in its web, like a lot of other people, and the FBI, the Mueller investigation, they knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but they still pursued me. And they pursued me out of a job. They pursued me legally. They didn't charge me with a crime, because again, they knew I hadn't committed any crime. But they made my life extremely difficult. And that's what they've done with an awful lot of conservatives and Republicans, whether it's housewives in Loudoun, Virginia, who only want to go to PTA meetings for their kids, whether it's for people who are in local and state politics around the country, or it's even Catholic churches. You know, the Justice Department and the FBI have become tools of the Democrats, of the administrative state, which is basically all Democrats anyway, and it has been used to hammer down conservatives and Republicans. And that's the real danger.
So
the
let me
danger
just
is
ask you, I heard
said that the real crisis for America is not going to be coming from without, it's going to come from within.
That's what I'm worried about. And I am worried about China. I'm worried about Russia. I'm worried about the Ukraine. But I am more in the mindset of think globally and act locally. And I'm worried about where we are in this country today. That's not the clip. Q. I'm looking for the Peter Navarro clip. Clip 2. There it is. For instance, to your point, let's watch this clip real quick.
And here's the thing. Here's what I'd ask your viewers to understand. It's not rare. I am the first senior White House advisor, what they call alter ego, ever to be charged with this alleged crime. And the irony here, Sean, the irony is that the Department of Justice itself has maintained a policy for more than 50 years that says that senior advisors like me absolutely cannot be compelled to testify before Congress. Why? Because it violates the constitutional separation of powers and interferes with the ability of executive privilege to provide effective presidential decision making. And that's where we stand right now. I have a great case that will go, and I've said from day one, Sean, day one, that this is going to the Supreme Court. It's what they call a case of first impressions that has significant constitutional issues.
Well, I mean, it is a first. I mean, here we have somebody whose crime was serving his country at great sacrifice, I think. I mean, I think you people who serve in government do so at great personal financial sacrifice. Now, some people make it up on the back end, but, you know, government workers are not the highest paid people, and they are among the brightest and best in many cases, like Dr. Peter Navarro, who I've had the pleasure of meeting and spent some time on the campaign trail in the 2022 election. So, I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, isn't it right up there with the Russia hoax and the January 6th fake
Absolutely.
commission?
But I work with Peter Navarro, who's a brilliant guy. And his argument is that Congress subpoenaed him to testify. And he said, no, I'm not going to testify because I'm not going to reveal the private conversations advising President, which I had. So there are two issues here. One is the separation of power. Congress can't go after a person who works for the president, works in the, not confirmed by the Senate, by the way, an independent guy. So Congress can't go after him. But then there's another thing which says there's executive privilege. So the president can get advice from whoever he wants to get it from. And nobody in Congress or in the courts can force the people to reveal what they told to the president. So there are two constitutional issues, and Peter's right, it'll end up going to the Supreme Court. There's a lot of stuff that's going to end up going to the Supreme Court in the next, I would say, 12, 24 months, in large part because the Democrats, who realize they're not going to win at the ballot box, They can't win. The majority of the country doesn't like what they're doing, especially the far left woke agenda, particularly the economics, particularly the open border. So how are they going to win? They're going to try to win through the courts, and they're going to try to have people who work for President Trump, certainly President Trump himself, tied up in a whole lot of legal knots and hopes that somehow they can kind of get him that way. I mean, I think there must be a room somewhere in the basement of a Washington building where a lot of Democrats are sort of like, they're getting, ha, we got him now. We're going to charge Donald Trump with yet another crime. And that's going to put him away for good. And they don't realize that the more they do it, the more the 50% of the people in the country who don't like the woke agenda, who are saying, well, wait a minute, maybe Donald Trump is being pursued unfairly, and maybe he's actually the only guy strong enough to go after the bureaucracy. It's not the people who come in with the president, it's that permanent bureaucracy, the people who can't be fired, who get automatic cost of living increases and pay raises, who have gold-plated health care and retirement plans. They're in those jobs forever. You can't get rid of them, and they think they run the place. And as far as presidents, and we certainly saw this in the Trump administration, they figure, oh, presidents come, presidents go. They're only in for 4 years. We'll wait them out. We're not going to follow their policy directives. We're going to do what we want.
My fear is that it goes deeper and it's more insidious than that. I agree with what you're saying, and I've read it and I've heard it from enough people to believe that that is absolutely the truth. But do you believe, and you have had a front row seat having served Nixon, Ford?
Yeah, Ford, Reagan, and Trump.
And Trump, 4 presidents over a span of 50 years.
Yeah.
So you know the workings and the inside of government. Are you of the opinion that there is a deep state, that there is a shadow government that is actually running our country behind the scenes?
I don't think it's deep. I don't think it's shallow. I think it's right in your face.
Right in your face.
Making a whole lot of efforts to disguise it, whether it's the FBI, whether it's the Justice Department, putting poor Peter Navarro in leg irons and pulling him off an airplane and treating him as if he was some, mass murderer for the crime of not wanting to reveal private conversations, which he has a constitutional right not to reveal. To go after him that way, and yet Hunter Biden, who we know was on the take, who we know did a lot of really bad things. We know the Hunter Biden laptop is real, and yet Hunter Biden they're not even looking at. So they're 2 completely different systems of justice. And it's not deep, it's in your face. They're not even shy about what they're doing. They're just doing it blatantly because they can get away with it.
And it just goes on and on. I mean, I spoke for 10 minutes about Fani Willis, and we know that the guy that she hired to be the special prosecutor, who had no RICO trial prosecutorial experience, went to Washington and went to the White House just in the days right after she appointed him this special prosecutor position. So if that doesn't point to collaboration and working with the Biden administration, as I'm fond of calling it, because to me it's Barack Obama third term, and so it speaks for itself in my view. But our listeners know that have been a student of the JFK assassination for 65 years, since I was home with the flu on November 22nd, 1963. So I'll ask you, do you have an opinion on who killed our 35th president?
No.
Come on.
I don't. I mean, I'm not in a position to even guess properly. That I'll leave that to people who've spent their lives studying it. I have not.
Well, I would encourage you to look under the layers and dig a little bit. Tucker Carlson believes that the CIA killed Kennedy. I happen to believe that the CIA killed Kennedy. There are so many books, like The Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot, that chronicles Allen Dulles' career as basically an assassin dating back to World War II when he was in the OCS. And it was part of his DNA, and he lays out a very convincing case. He didn't like Kennedy. Kennedy did not like him. They both blamed each other for the Bay of Pigs disaster. Kennedy fired Dulles as head of the CIA. 6 months later, Kennedy is assassinated. Now, Tucker takes it even farther, and in a recent clip on X that Tucker posted, he had this to say about your former boss, Richard Nixon.
This place since. Nixon got 17 million more votes than his opponent. Less than 2 years later, he was gone. He was forced to resign. And in his place, an obedient servant of the federal agencies called Gerald Ford took over the White House. How did that happen? Well, it's a long story, but here are the highlights, and they tell you a lot. Richard Nixon believed that elements in the federal bureaucracy were working to undermine the American system of government, and had been doing that for a long time. He often said that. He was absolutely right. On June 23, 1972, Nixon met with the then CIA Director Richard Helms at the White House. During the conversation, which thankfully was tape recorded, Nixon suggested he knew, quote, who shot John, meaning President John F. Kennedy. Nixon further implied that the CIA was directly involved in Kennedy's assassination, which we now know it was. Helms' telling response? Total silence.
Now, I know that this is probably difficult to imagine. I think some people would prefer just to be in denial and avoid the topic altogether. Maybe there's some fear that if you speak out that you're going to, not you, but me, others, Tucker, after all, he was the most popular, highly paid person on television who mysteriously lost his job without explanation. I don't know where that came from. I don't know about, but there are more questions than answers. But it is my considered opinion that the CIA and the NSA and the FBI operate in pretty much total secrecy. The CIA's budget is only known to a small handful of members of Congress. There is no accountability. There is no oversight. We know that they do not tell the truth when they are required by law to tell the truth to Congress. I am worried about our country and whether the CIA and these intelligence agencies and the alphabet agencies have a stranglehold on our government.
I think the alphabet agencies have an awful lot more power, and they through various legal means and extra legal means than they should have. And I would look at the 2016 election, which I am very familiar with, and say that it was the FBI working with people sort of on their payroll and more recently just off their payroll and working with the Hillary Clinton campaign, who came up with the whole Russia hoax and tried to influence and throw the election to Hillary Clinton. And when that didn't happen, they used all their efforts to try Trump's administration. And then in 2020, the CIA got in the act, and 51 former senior intelligence officials from the CIA and intelligence community, orchestrated by a guy who was still working for the CIA, came up with this letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was it was Russian disinformation, and that was just a few days before the 2020 election. And that swung the tooth out. A lot of people's minds were changed, and they've said it, and that may have made a difference in the 2020 election. And are they at it again? I'm not really sure. I know that the military has come out, former military officials have come out and said, well, Donald Trump, we can't have Donald Trump back in the White House. He's a dictator. He's going to overthrow the Constitution and declare himself dictator for life. So I can say 3 agencies now where you're seeing the FBI, working with the Justice Department, FBI is part of the Justice Department, the CIA, major part of the intelligence community, and now former military officers are all up in arms about trying to prevent Donald Trump from being president. I don't think they'll succeed. I think Donald Trump will be the nominee. I think he'll be elected, and I think he cleans house.
I so hope you're right. I was fortunate and honored to run for Attorney General of Georgia with President Trump's endorsement a little over a year ago. The only perfect person to walk the earth hadn't visited us in over 2,000 years. None of us are perfect. And President Trump certainly has his faults. But I dare his detractors to this show. I would love to debate them and challenge him on a single policy objective. We had a secure border. We had peace abroad. Crime was going down in America. We had the highest employment of our lifetime, the highest African American employment. More was done for criminal justice during the Trump administration in 4 years than during Barack Obama's 8 years. So yes, President Trump, like all of us, is flawed. He was the best president of my lifetime. We've got to get him back. And I do worry about it. I do worry because I was a lawyer on a case in Georgia. I'm boring my listeners now because they've had to listen to it every Saturday for the last year and a half. But I've seen the evidence in Georgia. 2020 in Georgia was stolen. 40,000 illegal votes, ballot harvesting, people voting from UPS stores and homeless shelters, duplicate ballots on Brad Raffensperger's own website, 3,200 of them, duplicate, that if you look at them, you can say, that's the same ballot. It's got a smudge in the top left-hand corner with somebody's red lipstick, and here's the same ballot with the same lipstick and the same, scored identically, and it's happened 3,200 times. We have that evidence. We have a judge, Brian Amaro, who ruled that we had demonstrated a prima facie case. The same judge ruled that the absentee ballots be unsealed and allow us to inspect them, and it's never happened. We have been prevented at every turn, and then Fonnie Willis brings this case alleging that it was election interference. The only election interference is the interference that she's trying to cover up through the best offense. That's my paradigm, and that's what I will believe and take to my grave unless someone convinces me others. But what chance do we have of getting Donald Trump as president? Because if they could get away with it in 2020, let's don't look back. Let's don't look at what happened in 2020. Let's just keep facing forward. Well, how convenient is that? Let's let them do it all over again. How are we going to prevent a steal or something to undermine the 2024 elections?
What is the old adage? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I would certainly hope whoever is running the Republican National Committee, whoever is running the elections in all 50 states, and particularly whoever the nominee is, and I think it'll be Donald Trump, make sure that doesn't happen again. And there's to do it. You just have, it's boring, it's dull, and there are ways to do it. I mean, Florida has done it, for example. Florida has clean electoral, clean registration polls. A lot of states don't. You can, especially with the foot allowed in mail-in voting, that was ripe for fraud. There's no reason to have mail-in voting this time. So
massive.
I would hope there are lawyers in every 50 states. How do you do it? Well, I don't think you throw up your hands and give up. I think you do it and you beat them at their own game. You make sure that you have clean elections. You challenge that different states, the different electoral districts, even the different towns and counties, to make sure, not after the election, but before the election. And then one thing I would say to every Republican is vote early. This is how the Democrats always win. They have early voting, and very large percentage of Democrats vote in the weeks before the election. And then election day, more of them vote, but the Republicans do just the opposite. And that is one of the ways Republicans lose votes. Vote early. If you can vote on October 1st, go to the polls and vote October 1st. Bank your vote, it's called. And I sure hope Donald Trump, and I know he will, and the RNC will encourage voters all over the country to bank your vote. Get there early, cast your vote. Once you've cast your vote, nobody else can cast the vote in your name in a fraudulent way. So let's just beat them at their own game and use what you talked about the Constitution, our founding fathers. They understood that power, people love to be in power, and they'll do anything to stay in power. They understood the nature of government was always to get bigger and cost more and more, employ more people. And they realized that in the United States, that whatever government you have, after 10, 15, 20 years, no longer is answerable to the people. They think they run things. So that's why the founding fathers gave us the ability to have revolutions. I wrote a book about this, a revolution at the ballot box, and that's what we need to do, a revolution at the ballot box. Elect a Republican president, elect Donald Trump, elect a Republican House, elect a Republican Senate, and then let everybody clean house. Otherwise, it's the administrative state, which is just another version of the Democrat Party. Something like 97% of Washington, D.C. votes Democrat, something like 94% of the federal bureaucracy votes Democrat. So if you really want to change things, you just got to get a different guy at the top. I believe there is an opportunity for fair elections, but only if we get smart about it. Don't whine about it, just get smart about it and beat them at their own game.
Well, I think that the judiciary should be our safe harbor. We should be able to turn to the courts to get justice. 62 cases. Media used to say after 62 cases, they've all been thrown out and none found that President Trump was treated unfairly. Well, that is they call it the big lie. That is the biggest lie, because the fact of the matter is that not one court, other than our Superior Court judge in Henry County, Georgia, who I referenced earlier, has conducted an evidentiary hearing. They have all been summarily dismissed on standing. Somehow we have got to get elections back to being safe. It's good for everybody. Hillary Clinton claimed that she was cheated out of 2016. Stacey Abrams claimed that she was cheated in 2018. We're claiming that we were cheated in 2020. How about we all just make a deal with each other and we stop and we rely on a competition for ideas and may the best person win? Like I maybe perhaps not think it used to be. Tom has been patiently waiting on the phone from Atlanta. We're coming to you live on the John Frederick Media Network with KT McFarland, the former deputy of the National Security Administration and just a fabulous, selfless government servant to this country for 5 decades. Tom, how are you today?
I'm great, and thank you to Ms. McFarland there for All Great Nation. And there's a notion out there, it's called confession by projection. And that's what the left does. They project onto the other side what they've already done or what they're fixing to do, if I can use a Georgia euphemism. So, Barack Obama said Donald Trump was the Manchurian candidate. No, quite the opposite is true. And then let's go to the current situation, RICO. So Fannie Willis is charging these people with RICO. No, that's her. And the evidence is coming out more and more. And I would dare to say, I would bet some money to say, if we get to the truth, we're going to find out that all of these cases are being done in coordination, and that would be, in my simple-minded understanding, that would be RICO, not what Trump and his allies are doing.
Well, I happen to share a lot of your sentiment. I mean, isn't it a little bit ironic that, Ms. McFarland, that they claim that Donald Trump is bad for seat when they're the ones that are trying to preclude him and exclude him from the ballot in like 19 states? I mean, isn't that undemocratic? Well,
yeah, it's like kill democracy, make the world safer democracy by killing it. Look, I think the Supreme Court takes care of all of those ballot access issues in February when they rule. They'll probably rule 9-0 in favor of President Trump to reign on the ballot. But something that you said, I think you have a rear view mirror. You can either look in the rear view mirror or you look in front of you. And Donald Trump has a compelling argument to why reelect him, and that's the economy, that's security of the border, that's national security of policy. That's trade, that's, you got a whole lot of things that he did right and that President Biden has reversed. And I think especially if you're looking to attract new voters, young voters, Hispanics, African Americans, young people under the age of 35, Trump should really focus on telling them how he's going to lives better. Are you resident again? Is it going to But I'm going to take border. We'll have problems all around the world, and then it's very hard to fix things. So get the new guy in. Make sure that the new guy is the old guy, and then have everything be reversed. Well,
I hope you're right. And I only want to look backwards to prevent the recurrent history repeating itself. And I'm afraid the gloss over 2020, and we allow the...
Not gloss over. I'm just saying don't waste...
No, I'm not accusing you of saying that at all.
Talk to somebody. Are you wanting to talk to him about the future or about the past? I'd rather talk to him about the future.
100%. I'm just confining that one little topic on safe, secure elections. And the narrative is a lie. Brad Raffensperger lies when he said it's the safest, most secure election we've ever had in Georgia. And there is a glimmer of hope. We've got a case in the U.S. District Court curling verdict. The judge, Judge Totenberg, has ruled that the Union machines are hackable. In fact, the expert, college professor from the University of Michigan, Dr. Haldeman, came to her court just last week, and within a matter of months proved that he could hack a machine. We know that there are vulnerabilities, and we have to fix it, I think, in order to be able to protect our democracy and our republic. I do want to ask you before we run out of time, you were there in the early days of the Trump White House, and one thing that has perplexed me since the beginning was the treatment of General Michael Flynn. He was accused of contact with Russian diplomats. Isn't it within the purview of the National Security Advisor to have communications with our allies and adversaries? I mean, isn't that just sort of part of what their job is, to talk to fellow diplomats in Washington, regardless of what country they're from?
There's a transition. So between the election and the president, the new guy taking office, it goes from November, all the end of November, December, and then into January, the new president takes office. It's a transition period. And that's when the old administration hands it off to the new administration. That's the time when the new administration should be, and needs to be, for this job, should be talking to all of our foreign leaders, because otherwise there's not a smooth transition of power. And I do think that's what General Flynn was doing, the smooth transition of power. And it's a tragedy, the way the Mueller investigation and the FBI went after him. But at the end of the day, I think he's been shown that he did not commit the terrible crimes they accused him of committing. It's just time for back in the White House and the country around. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to you, because I have to do something in about 3 minutes that can't be changed.
Well,
okay.
Thank you
very much.
On. I did have a couple other questions for you, but we'll save it for the next opportunity. But thank you, as one of our listeners said, thank you so much for everything that you've done for our country, and 2 daughters, and I hope.
And 3 sons. I want to point out I have 5 children, 3 boys, and they're just as
wonderful. Good for you. Well, thank you for coming on The Truth.
Assaulting the narrative. Destroying the lie. Unearthing the truth.
You can't handle the truth.